I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my face. Work a job every day till your dreams fade away. Like a card, never change, play the game that we say. I need a break. I'm staying strong, need to move on to be what I want. I'll keep dreaming on. I'm staying strong, need to move on to be what I want. I'll keep dreaming on.
What's up? Welcome back to another episode of the ElCamino build. Today we're getting into getting that steering in there and making sure everything on the inside of the cab is going to fit good and proper and right. So here I'm still working on the firewall a little bit. I kind of built my own construction out of flat stock, made a frame, a skeleton around it, so to speak. And that way it should be pretty easy to put on some sheet metal and stuff like that. I'm not going to do your traditional floors with all the bends in them and going around every little bit all nice and round and smooth like an actual floor would look. This is definitely going to have more of a race car feel. Now I know that a lot of race cars will run like the round cover over the trans, but I opted for a rectangular shape, and you're going to see why much later. There's kind of a theory behind it. There's an idea behind it. I kind of think it looks cool too. I like the way it's all good too. What the fuck? I like the way that it's all it's kind of squared off, and it kind of matches the rest of this car because it's an older car. It doesn't have like really round body lines or anything of the sort. So going with the square setup kind of works kind of cool. I think it's pretty neat. I like it. I enjoy it. And I think it'll be a little bit stronger once it's all done, and you'll see why it's got to be stronger. Don't forget, this is a drift car, so we got to do drift car things to it. So here I'm just building up the frame a little bit more, as you can, well, if you can get close enough to see. I used a lot of flat stock and a lot of bars for this that we're good for supporting one side of the sheet metal that I'm going to put on, but not the other. So basically, instead of having it all angle iron, because it's all on different kind of crazy angles, and sometimes I would need that angle iron not to be at 90 degrees, but to open up a little bit more, to grab a bit more of inside of where I need to go with this. I'm just kind of making my own, boxing it off, and making sure I got solid tabs everywhere that are going to hold the sheet metal for the floor, the firewall, and all that stuff in that area, but as well as be strong enough, and of course it's got to be like fireproof, stuff like that. So it's got to be strong enough the flames don't come through if anything like that should happen, any kind of liquid blows up. And it's got to be, well, basically I guess leak proof, and I don't want anything going through it. So yeah, trying to make everything good and solid. So before I go ahead and do like sheet metal on the floor and stuff like that, while I'm here, I figured it was a good time to dial in the steering and the brake system and eventually the clutch. It's all got to fit in here, so I've got to figure out a way to make it all work together and be good and solid. The little thing with the brakes is that if I just did sheet metal, then the pressure of my foot pushing that brake would definitely do something to that sheet metal. It would push it out, it would move it, it would distort it. And a big problem is when you have brakes and you have like a brake pedal that moves, basically it's not solid in one spot, you're going to get a lot of weird like feeling through it, and it's not going to feel exact. So like if you push more pressure on your pedal, it doesn't necessarily mean your brakes are getting all that much pressure. It could be the sheet metal moving out. So I'm going to have to make a bracket and fit this all in, but to make it all fit in, I'm going to have to eliminate the brake booster on it. So I'm not going to have power brakes on this. It's a race car. I wasn't really too concerned about that or plan to have power brakes on it. I've had cars without power brakes. Even driven older cars like this with that kind of weight behind it with power brakes. It's a little tougher, but it does its thing, and I don't have enough experience to really say that it's a fact or not, but I personally feel like I'm gonna get a little bit more brake feel out of the pedal if it's not powered. That way there's nothing like pushing behind it, there's no extra management, there's nothing between me and the brake pads really except for the fluid. Going this way, no booster. I'm going to hopefully put braided, hopefully. Okay, guys, focus. I'm going to hopefully put braided brake lines on it. And I've heard, again, I don't have enough experience to know for sure, but from what I understand, if you have braided brake lines, say that like 10 times fast, I'm telling you. It's early in the morning for me too, sorry guys. But if you have braided lines, it's less likely that the lines will actually inflate when you push on the brake pedal because you're filling those lines full of pressure. So naturally, a rubber line is going to want to expand a little bit. There's a little bit of room for play. And the whole idea, I guess, behind brake fluid is I'm assuming it doesn't really compress. So that way it's, you know, it's not like a sponge. It's not going to absorb any kind of force and stuff like that. It's going to go straight through. So I'm hoping it all works out good. Kind of lost where I was going on that, but anyways, now we're building up a metal plate. I got to get that lined up in there real good. Another problem is going to be getting all the pedals to work properly because there's a plunger in the back of that. You know how brakes work, right? You got to push down on the rod, which pushes the plunger inside the cylinder, which moves the fluid. So I need to figure out how to get a pedal to move that whole plunge, all that plumbing. I got to figure out a way to make that work. Now I don't have an actual set of pedals for this, so I'm gonna have to figure something out, but I'm just mounting this master cylinder, brake cylinder, in a position that I think would work out really good. It's out of the way, it's tucked underneath the steering column a little bit, just to the side of it. I want it to be away from heat, away from any kind of stuff that could possibly hit it. I also wanted to make sure that it was in a spot that it was easy to get to and I could easily change fluid if I needed to, or do any kind of work to it that might show up. You know, there's always some kind of maintenance, and I'm sure that as soon as I get this thing running, there's going to be a whole bunch of things that I'm going to have to pull apart and essentially redo, because that's just the name of the game. That's how this stuff works. You start building some crazy project and there's always something in the way. So here, I'm getting back to what I'm doing. I'm working on that plate still. What I'm doing is grinding out this little arch so it fits nicely on the side of the steering column, just like that. Hoping that that's going to make the mounting points pretty easy. Again, I'm making it so that the steering column is accessible. And if I do need to take it out for any whatever reason, that it should be pretty easy. So I'm going to make some sort of bracket system on this thing. But the idea, the name of the game is to just make it so everything's accessible, no headaches. If it's got to come apart, it'll come apart easy. I want to have access to pretty much everything on this machine without having to take a whole bunch of other stuff off. So here I'm drilling a hole with my hole saw set. That's a little sketchy, moves around a lot. I got to figure out something to lock that down. I think it's maybe not the proper grade stuff, or I need just a much better clamping system. But here you can see I've got the notch cut out for the steering. Fits pretty good. Now I'm starting making my brackets. On that previous scene, if you notice, there's holes already set for the master cylinder and for the brake and for the clutch. Now I'm not sure if this is going to work out, but the throw should be enough. But I'm basically using an old cylinder from an e-brake for my clutch because it's a Willwood, so I know it's quality. And it's going to fit in a good spot because it's nice, tiny, compact. And like I said, the only issue I might have is the stroke on it if it doesn't throw the fluid far enough. But it does have its own reservoir, it's its own independent system. So I'm hoping that that's another thing that's going to keep me out of the fire kind of deal. Like, so if there's a problem with the clutch, it's just with the clutch. Some machines I've seen, they run actually the hydraulics through the master cylinder. So if there's a problem going on somewhere, you might not be sure if there's a leak or whatever, where it's coming from, the brakes, clutch, what may be. It's got to be simple. That's the idea. It's an old muscle car. It's going to be cool. It's not going to be as simple as an old muscle car because we're going fuel injection with all this crazy electronics and all this ignition and stuff. But it's still, I got to keep it as simple as possible because it's a race machine. It doesn't have to look the greatest, but it's got to perform. You want to make sure that you can just get a bunch of lap times out there. So whatever makes it easier to maintain and easier to work on, that's the way I'm going to go with it. So I got that fit in there. I'm test fitting it, make sure I got room for my feet, for everything else. And also you really got to pay attention to how close the steering column is getting to the exhaust manifolds and any kind of engine stuff, and figure out where, because this is not a complete steering column yet, there's still a rod in the front that I need to attach. I had to figure out to make sure that that would clear everything else and get all the way to the front to the rack and pinion. And that way I can just set it up. I'm probably gonna have to build some custom parts for that, but we'll get there when we get there. Right now I'm making the bracket to hang the steering column off of the roll cage. Obviously you want it off your roll cage because it's got to be on pretty much the most solid part of the vehicle. Steering, that's going to get a lot of abuse. It's going to get swung around and spun real quick. It's not going to just be me driving this. Like I said, I'm going to let the boys drive it, my buddies and my brothers, all that stuff. So, you know, somebody out of frustration might start pounding on that steering wheel. Had to make sure it was good and strong. So essentially I used the same size tubing for the bracket that's on the cage. It should be plenty strong. The bracket from that tubing to the steering column itself, maybe not so much, but right now I'm only doing this to fit it. It's I'm going to go over everything later, make sure everything's good and solid, and rework stuff to look better, to work better, to just be an overall nicer, complete process. So right now I'm just getting that to hang in there. I got it pretty much to a good spot where I feel that it's going to be good and comfortable. And with the fact that there's tilt steering on that steering column, that's a lot of adjustability too for different drivers, how they like it. So I'm pretty sure that everything's set in place where I need it to be. It's time to install the front plate for the master cylinder and the clutch cylinder and the bracket for the steering. Now this plate is nice, heavy duty, good and thick. I shouldn't be able to push through it with my foot. So it was definitely safe to go ahead and weld it onto the frame of the chassis that I've been building, the skeleton, the firewall, whatever you want to call it, because this is a piece that's not going to move. Everything else is made to bolt on and off of it. As you can see there, I was just welding the steering column on, but should be able to take the bolts right out of it. Everything's going to slide out. Same thing with the brakes. So now that this plate is in, it's essentially part of the entire body. As you can see here, it's all tied in nice and good. I've got the cylinders in it, made sure everything fit, everything clears. As far as I can tell so far, everything lines up great. I'm not going to have any problems with any lines. Some of them might be kind of close, but it's definitely doable. The pedals are all in a good spot. It feels like the big question, big problem I'm going to have is getting a set of pedals that actually line up to that properly. And I'm pretty sure, well, I made my own custom pedal set. Now they're not fully functional yet, but they're there, they're in, they're mocked up, they're lined up. Should work out all right, but you're going to have to stick around and see what happens next, baby. So anyways, we got more coming always. Hope you enjoy.
If you can't fix what you're